I will need a couple of volunteers to hold posters when I get there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the mental and emotional game. And I want to just give you a little background that isn't in your packet. I started tennis at age 42. So I didn't take the typical path. I got certified by USPTA at age 62. I've been coaching for the last 12 years at Parkway South, but I was a late comer to the game. And I loved it. I fell in love with the game right away. But the problem that I had at age 42 as a grown man with a Ph.D. in psychology, okay, that's an important fact. At age 42, tennis did not bring out the best in me. It brought out kind of the jerk in me. I mean, I channeled my best John McEnroe a good amount of the time because I wanted to win so badly. I loved the game. I loved the competition, but I wanted to win. It was terrible when I missed a shot. It was terrible, you know? And I was fascinated by that as a psychologist and embarrassed by that as a grown man. I had one pro at the time who said, "Peter, you're not good enough to be that angry." And that started me around getting on the right track. And then my wife Martha, who was my first tennis teacher, got me really on the right track when she said, basically, I'm not going to play with you anymore unless you clean up your act. So I cleaned it up. But the impression was made. The mental and emotional stuff is really deep. It goes really deep, and I'll get into a little bit of what we do about that. But I want to ask you, okay, and it's not a trick question, just yell it out. What percentage of tennis is mental?
100%.
90?
Yeah. High.
95. Anybody want to go lower than that? Okay.
Yeah, I'd go lower.
You go lower.
Yeah,
How much?
go 50.
50. Okay, 50. Anybody want to go below 50? No. Okay. Big part of the game, right? 70-80% of a match is not playing the point. It's in between points. It's changeovers. 70-80% of the match. So, next question, and you may know where I'm going with this. What percentage of our practice time is intentionally devoted to the mental and emotional aspects of the game? Is it 90?
No.
Is it 95? Is it 50? No. No. There's a big gap there. And I want to say, if you've got a 2-hour practice, right, 120 minutes, if you're spending 10, 12 minutes intentionally, explicitly, on mental and emotional training, you're a leader among coaches. Mostly it happens, there may be something that happens and you react to it, and you'll deal with it. But few of us really make it an explicit part of our practice plans. So if there's nothing else you walk away with what I've got to say, I'd encourage you to look at your practice plans. Boys season is coming up in a few weeks. Look at your practice plans. Can you squeeze a few minutes more of mental and emotional in? Any more that you do is going to be a real value add to your players. So I came up with this compete, learn, honor approach that I have my book here. I came up with it, excuse me, because I couldn't find a system 12 years ago when I started coaching JV2, our real development team. I couldn't find a system that was both comprehensive enough to really get all the issues that I wanted to covered, and simple enough that I could remember it and my players could remember it and react to it. So that's how I came up with Compete, Learn, Honor. And what we do, we have these posters that I've laminated, and this goes on the fence, the tennis fence, every day. It's our motto. The very first day, we talk about what Compete, Learn, Honor means, and I'll get to that in just a minute. And every day we have that, and we have one other one. That is, we build people up, we don't tear them down, that one of our seniors came up with a few years ago. And so between Compete, Learn, Honor, and we build people up, we don't tear them down, these two things define our culture as a team. And we want to get this done the first couple of days so that everybody's really understanding that, yeah, we're training to win, we want to win, but winning is not up here on these posters. Compete, Learn, Honor is, and we support each other. We build each other up. There's no bullying on this team. There's no, trashing each other. And it extends to our opponents and et cetera, et cetera. So we do that. And how we define it is compete means we're going to give 100% effort all the time. And there's an article up here that I did that has all this in it, up on it. If you haven't gotten it, it's up here. Maybe we can just pass these out. So 100% effort all the time. That doesn't mean that you're giving the maximum that you've ever given every day. You give the best that you have that day. None of us is the same at our high level all the time, not even within one practice. We go up and down. But you give the best that you've got that day, 100%. Learn, we are going to be open, curious, and humble learners. We want to learn. We want to learn. It isn't going to be one of those things where, sometimes on JV, I'll say, okay, we're going to work on serve today, and one of the kids will say, well, I already know how to serve. Yes, you do. If you mean you can, most of the time, sort of get it over the net, but not if you were talking about varying placement and height and spin and depth and all that. So even the top people, right, best in the world are always learning, tinkering. So open, curious, humble learners. I'll come back to humble in a couple minutes. And the third one, honor. By how we act, we're going to bring credit to ourselves, our teammates, coaches, opponents, officials, if we're lucky enough to have them, our family, school, and the game of tennis. And so the whole coaching philosophy that I start with is, if we keep kids safe and we get them to embrace Compete, Learn, Honor, and we're having fun doing all this, then guess what? We've had a successful season, regardless of our W's and L's, regardless. I have to tell you, this is not always the easiest sell for some parents, some players, and some administrators. I'm lucky. At South High, my head coach, Nick Tenerchis, buys into it completely. That's the culture varsity has as well as JV. Our athletic director buys into it. Our principal buys into it. So we're lucky. You may have to do a little bit of selling on that. But the idea is, I played judo in high school. And in judo, you don't resist your opponent's strength. You bring it in and use that strength against them to knock them off balance, right? And this is the same thing. The whole idea here is we are training to win, but we never talk about wanting to win, winning being the most important thing. That's what we're out there for. No, we really de-emphasize the winning, because by doing that and focusing on Compete, Learn, Honor, and all these 24 sayings that describe what Compete, Learn, Honor really is, by doing that, we give them more mental and emotional weapons to make it more likely that they can play their best, which means their odds of winning go up. So, you're trying to get to the goal without naming that as a goal. And I want to tell you, if you have a team culture like this, you can hang on to not just your basic rec level players, But you can hang on sometimes to really high performance players. We had, some of you know, we had Carson Haskins at South High, 4-time state champ, undefeated, never lost a set in 4 years, right? Yeah, dream on, all of us. But after his freshman year, okay, here he is, you know, he was beating high school kids at the age of 8 or 9. You know, I coached him in tennis camp in the summer. He was beating high school kids. So here's this immensely talented player. Freshman year, undefeated state champ, check that box. We didn't know if he was going to come back, right? Because his national, regional, and national ranking was going to suffer because he couldn't play enough tournaments for those rankings as a high school player being on the team. He came back 4 years in a row because he loved the team environment. He loved the bonding. He loved, you know, he sees the posters out there every day. And, you know, the whole way that we're approaching it, yeah, we want to win. And we win a fair amount of the time. But it's about compete, learn, honor, having fun, keeping the kids safe. So it's really powerful. In this scheme, the honor is the most important thing. It's written compete, learn, honor because compete is what we're trying to help them do on the court, right? But honor is the foundation. Jose Higueras, that some of you know his name, he was for many years USTA Player Development Director and is still consulting for player development. And he had this great way of describing what to focus on, the emphasis that things should be focused on in practice. And he said, let's flip it, because what you see at the end of the stroke is you see the hand and the hand moving the racket into the ball. But if the eyes haven't seen what's going on the other side of the court, and the feet, because of the eyes, don't move to the right spot, then the hand can't be effective, okay? So the way you have to emphasize is eyes, feet, hands, okay? We spend a lot of time on contact point, but if you haven't seen and moved properly, boom. So eyes, feet, hands. In the same way, it's honor, learn, compete. The respect for the game, the respect for your opponent, for yourself, for your teammates, officials, coaches, all of that, and wanting to get better because you love the game. You know, reminding your players, why are you playing tennis? Just a simple question, why are you playing tennis? And if the answer is just my parents want me to, that's not good. You might want to reconsider, because, you know, that's not it. Well, I'm playing tennis because I want to win. I want to be a champ. Well, guess what? Love of the game means that you've got to like doing this even when you don't win, because guess what? Most of us are not Carson, and we're going to lose a lot. We're going to lose a lot. Even the top players in the men's and women's tour, okay, they lose almost half of their points, a little less than half of their points in 20 to 25% of the games they play. Yeah, they win more than everybody else, but they're still losing on a regular basis. So you've got to love the game to improve, okay? So it starts with that kind of honor, and the humility. By humility, I mean having an accurate, honest assessment of what you're strong at and where you need to improve, areas for development. We never call them weaknesses, we call them strengths and areas for development. And if you have that, then you're always eager, that open, curious, humble learner, you're eager to learn more. And that extends to recognizing the honor part, that the other people around you, including your opponent, also have areas of strength and areas in need of development, and you can learn from them in the match. You can learn from your teammates. You're not just learning from your coaches or some famous tennis pro online. You know, there's pretty much everybody that you associate with, all of us can learn from each other. We all, I mean, any one of you could be up here talking and telling us what your take on all this is, right? So that's the attitude that we want to instill in our players. The other part of this, so love the game more than how you perform is one of the most important one of these couple of dozen things that we hang up on the fence. The other really gateway one is lose yourself. Lose yourself. The biggest problem that as a psychologist I tell my players where fear comes from, fear and nerves and stress and pressure become paralyzing when yourself is the center of attention. You've got to lose yourself to be able to handle what's going on out there on the court. Because what goes on the court is difficult. It's adversity out there, physically and mentally. And if you are focused on having to win this point, this game, this match, because that's such a critical part of your identity, you're going to be in fear a lot of the time out there. Because anything that threatens that is going to be like that. And it comes from, we talk with our players about this, because I want them to understand where fear comes from, okay? And psychologically, where fear, I don't mean somebody's attacking you with a gun or a knife, I mean that's physical safety. Psychological fear. In psychology, we've got this theory, self-determination theory, it's called, theory of human motivation. And it's backed up by decades of research. And it basically says that our behavior is motivated by three things. The need for autonomy, ABCs, autonomy, belonging, and competence, right? Autonomy's, human beings want to feel like they have some control over things. That's one that gets threatened a lot out on the tennis court. You don't have a lot of control a lot of the time, okay? Belonging, how your relationship's doing. Satisfying connections. And competence, are you good at something, and hopefully multiple things that you value, that the people you value, and that society values. If you've got those ABCs going, then difficult situations can feel like challenges. If something's wrong with those ABCs, they feel like threats. And when you feel threatened, that's when you tighten up. Okay, that's when your heart rate gets too fast, it's too sweaty, your brain gets slower, your legs get slower, and you make the very mistakes that you were afraid of, and you lose. So when you're trying to focus on winning, and it matters so much, all that physiological stuff happens. So a lot of what we do is simply help players try and rehearse what they're going to do between points, before the point happens. Rehearse pre-match, in between points, and post-match mental and emotional stuff, okay? So, for example, we'll take a couple of these posters, and a lot of what we do is just trying to cognitively rewire. Melanie, would you mind holding this one, please? Susie, would you mind holding that one? Okay, so we put these things up on the fence every day in addition to compete, learn, honor, and we build people up, we don't tear them down. One or two additional of the 2 or 3 dozen sayings. And we talk about it. A lot of this is just saying these things out loud to start replacing the negative habits that our players have. So, somebody want to read what this one says? Anybody?
Improving is a better goal than winning.
Could you say it a little louder?
Sure. Improving is a better goal than winning.
That was said with confidence. That's great.
Oh.
That was said with confidence that second time. Anybody, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? What does that mean when we say improving is a better goal than winning? What does that say to you? Anybody?
Focus on the journey, not the destination.
Focus on the journey, not the destination. Good. Anybody else?
It has to do more with something you can control than something you can't control.
Something you can control than something you can't control. Bingo. Now at the JV level, it takes a little while to get that. Ben got that right away because we're experienced here, right? But I'll ask them, can you totally control whether you win or not? Can you?
No.
No. You have an opponent, you've got weather, you've got bad luck, crack on the court. You can't control that. Can you control whether you improve or not? Yeah. Yeah, you can. So if your goals are about improving, you can always reach your goals. And you can keep stretching and create new goals. That's why improving is a better goal than winning. Bingo, because you can control it. Okay? Anybody want to read this one?
Mistakes are necessary to improve.
Again?
Mistakes are necessary to improve.
Yes, mistakes are necessary to improve. Great. What does that mean to anybody? What does that mean?
You're gonna make mistakes.
You gotta learn from your mistakes.
You
You're
gotta-
gonna make them, so
You're
you
gonna
have
make
two
them.
choices, learn or don't.
Nobody's perfect. You've got to learn from your mistakes. Anybody else? Those are both great.
It's life in general.
It's what?
Life in general.
Life in general. Mistakes are necessary to improve. Anybody
Fail,
else?
fail and fail often.
Fail and fail often. These are great. These are great.
It's also getting out of your comfort zone.
Getting out of your comfort zone, stretching. Look at this word. Does that poster say mistakes are okay to make? No. It says mistakes are necessary, like you said. So what we want to do is create a mistake-friendly zone in our practice. We want the players to make mistakes because they're challenging themselves to stretch, to grow. And yes, we're going to help them learn from those mistakes, right? We're not just going to have them make mistakes and not show them what to do and how to correct that, but we want to stretch them. That's the whole point about being open to learning, and making mistakes is good. And so we'll talk about this, and it literally takes that 2 or 3 minutes, okay, to start the practice. And that sets the tone, and then you guys can put those down, thank you. During practice, then, we'll reinforce that. If I see somebody doing something that we talked about that is part of our drill, or like in Kelly's drill, if they're changing direction at the right time, they happen to miss the shot, it's like, hey, that was a good mistake. That was a great mistake. I love that. You know, a little higher over the net next time, but a great mistake. Keep that up. And just keep reinforcing that, you know, that environment where we're about making mistakes because we're about learning, okay? So, the fear, the mistake, all that, very important. How much time, Brett, do I have?
20 minutes.
Okay, great, because we'll have a couple of things to demonstrate for you. And
Sorry,
then,
30 minutes. Go ahead, Peter, if you need it. 30.
and then a group game that will be a lot of fun. So the thing that is important to remember about this is it's got to be practiced, okay? The way to make, whether you use something from this compete, learn, honor approach that I came up with, or USTA Mental Skills and Drills Handbook, which is a tremendous encyclopedia of stuff, or, you know, there's a lot of good stuff out there on mental and emotional training. This is just one approach. But whatever you do, I think there's 3 principles that will help to make it effective. And that is, the key words here, choose, habits, and small improvements. Choose. Your player, you've got to convince your players that they have to choose to put the time in, you know, on training themselves mentally and emotionally, just like they're gonna, if they're really interested in getting better, they're gonna do buckets of serves, right? They're gonna try. It's intentional. The same way that you as a coach have to decide how much you're gonna include mental and emotional in your practice plans. So it's gotta be chosen. I tell my players, even at the JV level, you guys are the CEO of your tennis business. I'm your coach, but all I am is an advisor. I'm a consultant. You're making the decisions about what you prioritize, how much you practice, how hard you practice, what you practice on. I'm giving you ideas, giving you nuggets, but you're making the choice. So you've got to choose. It won't happen haphazardly or by osmosis somehow. Second thing, habits. We are not trying to give players a tip or a trick, with these things. Okay, there's a difference. We're trying to actually rewire how they think. If the average age of your player is 16, they've spent 16 years developing to where it's now unconscious ways of dealing with adversity and disappointment and rejection and failure and all of that. It doesn't take 15, 16 years to undo that, but it does take some time. It does take some commitment over time, okay? Has anybody read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits? It's a fantastic book, and it's actually it's a readable by your players too. But he talks about how we've got to focus on not the goals, right? Because everybody wants to win. If it was about setting goals, then everybody's setting the same goal. We all want to win. It's about the systems that we have in place and what kind of systems your players have to reach whatever goals they're setting, okay? So his phrase is, you get what you repeat. You get what you repeat. And what I tell the players is, look, the brain is a muscle, okay? You've got to use it to strengthen it. And it's like anything else, only it's got a different capacity as the brain. Those neurons up there, they're wired to make you think a certain way. So what we're trying to do, literally, is increase the wrapping around the neurons in the brain, okay, the myelin, so that it becomes faster to think positive thoughts instead of negative, faster to deal with a standard in-between points routine that you have written down and developed and memorized, so that in a match situation, you're just doing it. And you can't get that myelin wrapped around and faster brain transmission unless you repeat, repeat, repeat. So it's a horrible pun, but I say, you've got to put the miles in to get the mile in. Okay, they grow. I'm almost ashamed, but not totally ashamed. So you got to do that. The third thing is small improvements. And another thing that James Clear talks about is the small improvements, and I talk about this in my book a little bit too. We're not trying to help them set goals or set goals for them that are like, if you have a 60-mile-an-hour serve, you're going to have a 100-mile-an-hour serve by the end of the season. No. If that happens, wonderful, but it's not likely to. Could you have a 70-mile-an-hour serve by the end of the season? Sure. Sure you could. Small steps. 1%, 2%, 5% improvement in several things. Several mental, emotional things, several technical things, several strategic things. Little adjustments make big impacts. No less than, if you change the angle of the racket by ½ degree to a degree over here, feet of difference in the impact of that ball over there, and where it lands and how it lands, what it's doing, what it forces the opponent to do. So tiny little adjustment here, big difference down there. Craig O'Shaughnessy is the stats guy. Some of you may know of him for ATP and WTA. Until recently, he was Djokovic's analytics person. He crunches the numbers and knows what he's talking about. And he has shown that a close match, right? You're winning about 50%, your opponent's winning about 50% of the points. That's a close match. If you can bump up your percentage to 55, that match can become a blowout. Just 50% to 55. So think of it this way. If you can improve a handful of things by 1%, 2%, up to 5% each, that's not much improvement, but together and accumulated over time as they become wired more into you, whether it's mental, emotional, or technical, there's 5 or 6 points in a match. And depending on when those points occur, that may turn a close match into a blowout. So again, it's focusing on those process things. If they can learn a few of these principles and turn them into habits that are automatic, that don't break down under pressure, you know, as Kelly said, I mean, it's one thing to do it in practice, but if you can't do it in a match, then you don't have it. It's not yours. It's got to be that automatic. Show you a couple of things that we do, and then we'll do a group game. One of the big things we talk about is no excuses. No excuses. When we go out on the court, it needs to be an excuse-free zone. A mistake-friendly zone, but an excuse-free zone. I got so tired one boys season. I coach boys and girls. I got so tired in one boys season of all the whining, of the complaints, the excuses for what was happening, anything other than taking responsibility for what they were doing. That I went home, got a little box, wrote excuse box on it, and I brought it to practice, put it there on the court. And as they walk in the court, I say, look, put your excuses in here. This is an excuse-free zone. And one of my guys looked at, it was a littler box than that. I don't know if you can even see this, some of you. This is one of the excuse boxes. And I think you can see the other one. And he looked at this little box that was even smaller than the one that Brett's holding. And he said, Coach, I got more excuses than are going to fit in that little box. It was great. It was like Jaws, right? You're going to need a bigger boat. So I went and I got a bigger box. Wrote excuse box on it, and this is the bigger box. And brought that to the court. And then we did the same thing. And then one girls' season, the girls decided that that was too shabby, and my handwriting was illegible, so they made me a nice, pretty one. So now we have 2 size boxes. And I tell them, if you've got a kind of day-to-day typical excuse, I got too much homework. Well, everybody has too much homework. That can go in there. That's in there. If on the other hand, you come to the court and it's just, I suck. There. That's a big one. That's a big one. And what I tell them is literally, write down on a piece of paper whatever's distracting you from being present fully, giving 100%, you know, and being a supportive teammate in this practice. Write it down, crumple it up, toss it into one of those boxes. If you don't want to write it down, do it metaphorically in your head, because that's what you're going to do in a match anyhow. That's part of our in-between points routine. Crumple that point away. Even if you want it, just we're on to the next point. So literally do it, or, you know, metaphorically. Sometimes players stand in the box or sit in it because they feel so bad, you know. And it's like a little excuse box sauna. They come out of that box, they're laughing, and you know, you can use a trash can, you can use an empty racket bag, anything that's physical. You can use a hopper that doesn't have anything in it. Anything that physically gives them a space where they can imagine or literally put excuses there makes your point, right? And the players will start enforcing it themselves very quickly. Because then you'll hear, you know, somebody will say, oh man, I hate playing in the wind. And someone else will yell, excuse box. So they start, and it's in a friendly way. It's still in a we build each other up way. It's a friendly way of saying, look, winners are those who take responsibility for what happens. That's who winners are, right? No excuses. So we do that. Positive self-talk and positive talk to doubles partners. Big part of all of this is positive self-talk. I think you can tell of this compete, learn, honor thing. And we rehearse all of that. Something else we rehearse is a flashlight, but it's, well, not working. But it's my microphone, my pretend fake microphone. We rehearse no different than we rehearse in between point routine, pre-return, pre-serve routines. I want them to rehearse. What do you say when your parent or a friend who knows you played today says, "Did you win?" That's the first question anybody's going to ask you. Did you win? Or if you're lucky enough to ever have an interview after a match, how are you going to deal with it? So we actually rehearse, okay? And what I want, and I stick something like this on a microphone. We pretend we're on Tennis Channel, you know? And it's like, so, it was a tough match out there today. What do you think happened? And the first couple of times you do this, something like that, the players are like, what? What's going on? You know? But then they start getting the idea, because what we want is, we want you to thank your opponent, compliment your opponent, right? I mean, whether you won or lost, you're supposed to, when you shake hands, it's like, nice match, good match, right? It's more than that, though. We want you to compliment your opponent, say you had a tough match, you did the best you could today, played hard, and here's what I liked about how I played, here's what I'd like to improve, and end with another compliment to your opponent. So it goes something like, so how did it go today? Well, you know, I had a good opponent, we played a tough match, I played hard and to the best of my ability today. And I liked that I came in more than I usually do. I tried to put pressure on my opponent at the net. I'd like to finish those volleys a little bit better. You know, she made some great passing shots, so all credit to her. We had a great match. And, you know, whatever the words are, I mean, they have to be the words of your player so that they're authentic. But help them rehearse is the idea. And you can, I mean, it's fun to do that. It's a little weird at first, but they get into it. And then the final thing, example, adjust, adapt, and survive is another one of the slogans in the book and, you know, that we put on posters. It's actually adapted from a Marine slogan, because tennis is it's not warfare, but it's lots of emergencies out there that you have to adjust to, right, and adapt. So we do, and Kelly started with some of this at the end of hers about the 3 serves and 2 returns. We do a lot of scoring and playing rule variations that force them to adapt and adjust in order to survive. And players don't like these. They don't like these kinds of things. The 1 serve, 2 returns, but we put them in a lot of situations of, you know, your starting server starts at 1540, you know. I have one where I will give them 1 intentionally bad line call per set, 1 cheat, and they can do it on match point. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, do you think you're never going to get an opponent who's going to try and hook you on match point? Yeah, we're going to do that. We have closeout scoring. Jorge Capistani, some of you may know of him, came up with this one, closeout scoring, which I love. Whoever gets to 40, whether it's, you know, doubles, team, singles, if you've got 40 and you don't win that game, you go to 0. Your opponent gets that point because they won it, and it keeps going, okay? So it really puts pressure on closing it out, right? And that's a great one. It can go on for a while. So the key here, though, to any of these, I mean, your imagination can just, you know, there's limitless ways of changing, you know, you can't hit to certain areas of the court. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing it. You have to have four balls each across the net before the point begins, you know, and they can't be pity-pat. They've got to go past the service line. So whatever you want to do, you're trying to create some match pressure that mimics it a little bit. But it has to count. Because invariably the players will say, does this count for our ranking? Are the results of this match going to count where they could cheat on match point? The answer is yes. Everything counts. All matches count for, you know, I mean, we've got to have a lineup. You know, we're trying to de-emphasize the winning and focus on improving, but we also have to have a lineup that's based on performance on the court. So yeah, they see me write it down. They see the team, the score sheet. Everything counts, and it really helps. It really helps get that sense of adjusting and adapting, and reminding them that they're playing this game because they love playing the game. You know, not because every point should be the same. They're playing it because it's tremendously varied. No point is ever identical to another point. So have a lot of fun with that. The most important thing, and we'll do a quick little group game that we like to end with. The most important thing, though, out of all this is not written in that as a poster. It's a variation on love the game. It's a variation on we build each other up. But the main thing is your players have to understand that how you feel about them has nothing to do with whether they win or lose. How you feel about them has nothing to do with whether they win or lose. We had our #1 team, JV team in girls season a few years ago, was having a really rough day. They were down 1-6, and I had had them over to the fence once earlier in the match, and been completely ineffective because they proceeded to lose the next 3 games. So that didn't work really well. But here they are, 1-6, and I saw what was happening, and okay, I'm going to call them over to the fence one more time. And I said, look, you guys know this, but I want to remind you that how I feel about you has nothing to do with whether you win or lose this match or any other match. I love you whether you win or lose. And one of them turned to her partner and said, Coach Pete said he loves us.
Oh.
And they just smiled, and you could see the tension, the way they were fighting themselves melt away. And they went out and they flowed. They played instinctively. They trusted themselves. They were smiling. They were having fun again. It's not a fairy tale. They still lost, you know. But they only lost 6-8, which meant they won 5 of the last 7 games. You know, they really competed, learned, and honored. And so I highlighted that match at our season-ending awards banquet, as one of the best matches we had all season. How they turned it around, simply because they were reminded. Remember the ABCs? B is belonging. At that moment, they needed reassurance. And that's all they needed. They didn't need technical. They didn't need strategic or tactical at that moment. They just needed to know that we were okay. You know, so that's the most important thing you guys do as coaches anyhow. So if you do that and they improve as players and as people, it doesn't matter what the W's and L's are. Okay? So we like to end, we have some extra rackets. Where's my racket?
Net box.
Oh, it's up to you. It's more fun with everybody up here, however many rackets there are. Does anybody know the game Wipeout? Okay. Whoever can get a racket, come on up here and just get into the line here. We use this as a practice ending game, and it's really good because you can combine varsity and JV, so it's really great for team bonding. Okay? So whoever's going to play, come on up. Anybody can play. If you've got a racket, come on in. Yeah. We've got ringers here. Uh-oh. Good thing we're not playing for money. All right. But count off. We're going to make two teams. So 1, 2, 1, 2. One's over here, two's there, but wait, don't go yet. Here's what we're gonna do. One player from each team comes out, and we're gonna play a singles point. I'll feed it in, okay? Here's what happens. Whoever wins that point stays. The next person in their line joins them. Person who loses the point, end of their line, one person comes out. Now, I will feed the singleton. Okay, the single player. The single player can play the doubles lines. The multiple players have to play the singles lines. When the single player beats the multiple players, it's a wipeout. Okay, then that team adds one more. Two go off, next one comes on. The game ends when one team has all of its players on the court and they beat the singleton from the other team. But the fun, of course, is when you have one player here and 10 people over there, and the one player beats him, and it's wipe out! And it can go on and on and on. So when you're, if it's close to the end of practice, and we do this maybe 10 minutes before the end of practice, but it can last longer than that. So at that point, you've got to pick one player, have the teams, pick one player from each team to play a singles point to end it. The winning team does not pick up the balls. So my goal is to have as many balls out there as possible. So there's something to fight for. Okay, one's over here, two's over here. And when you do this, I'll start with easy feeds. And then we'll one player up from each team. You don't need a ball, I'll be feeding. I'll start with easy feeds, and then we'll vary the feeds, and they'll start complaining about the feeds. If you win, you stay. You don't need a ball. Yes, if you win, the next one in line joins you, and then they have a brand new single person. All right, how old are you? 21. 28. Okay, I'm an old guy, so I'm going to give the preference to the older guy. Singles point. Some nice shots. That's out. Okay, add one. Next person in line comes in. You guys play the singles lines. You get the doubles out. You can play anywhere you want the doubles out. Okay, add one more. Next one. Come on, hustle, hustle, hustle. Let's go. Let's go. won the last point. So let's have one player, pick one player to represent your team. All of you guys get on the court. This is the end. This is how the game would end. Everybody's on the court. All right. So how many people are over here? 9 people. All right. How many are you? And you're one. Who should win this point? You. Excellent. That's the right answer. Are you guys ready to win this? No? Yes. I didn't hear a lot of confidence there. Are you guys ready to win this? Yes. All right. I still think you're going to win.
Nobody.
All right. This team would have to pick up the balls. And of course, had you won it, then it's wiped out and it's reset all over again. All right. One last thing, real fast. Everybody who has a racket, is this anybody else going to join? Okay. Last game is All Stars, and this is a multiple court game. We usually do this over 3 courts, 6 halves of the court. So this time we'll do it 4. So count off by 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
1,
3.
4,
1, 2, 3.
4,
1, 2,
3,
4. 1, 2, 3.
All right. 1's on this court, 2's on that court. 3's on that court, 4's on this court. Again, this is another game. Wait, 4's here? 4's over here. 3's, 2's, 1's. This is another game where varsity and JV can play together. You just have to make sure, same as Wipeout, that your varsity is split up and varsity is, evenly distributed so they're not hogging court. Now, I want you to take up positions anywhere in the whole court, including the doubles alleys. This game, you can stay wherever you want. Okay? The idea of this game is to use soft slice strokes and soft top spins. You can play in your own box. You can play across the net. You can play to the other court diagonally. When we have 3 courts, you can go 2 courts down. The whole idea is get touch and quickness to the ball. I'm going to feed it in and say, what's your name? Jason. Okay. Mark? So, if I feed it in and I feed it towards Jason, he can choose to just do a little slice to Mark. And then Mark can choose to go straight ahead, over here, anywhere. Okay? Yeah, not me. I'm the feeder. So that's it. If you miss, okay, if it goes anywhere out of bounds, or you miss it into the net, you're out. If the ball lands near you, so if the ball lands near Jason but he doesn't pick it up, okay, he's out, whether he touched it or not. Okay, so that's part of the strategy. Is sometimes you're trying to get it to where they're close enough that they can't reach it. Okay, here we go. And you cannot miss that ball. You've got to get it over to somebody else, not necessarily over the net, but to somebody else. Game ends when only 1 court is represented. Okay? And once a court is empty, you can't hit it to that court, you lose. Yeah. Yeah, you can hit it anywhere as long as it's in bounds. It can't be in the red area. Okay, we ready?
Go, Mark.